This gem of a property right here on Hillcrest Road was once the home of a Hollywood Heights resident who at one time was dubbed the greatest actress in America. We're actually going to go behind the gate and see her property in a little while, but first, we're going to sit across the street in the park and put the, story in this story location tour. Before we take a closer look at 1914 Hillcrest and talk about the actress who once lived there, I think it's important, plus I think she deserves to have her backstory told. I could actually do an entire story location tour on her alone, but that would require a trip to New York City to do it properly, so I think I'm just gonna breeze through her life as quickly as possible up until the point in which she moved in here. I think if you bear with me and have some patience, it will be a little more rewarding, perhaps a little more special because, she was special. She was something else. People who you really respect and admire have called her the greatest stage actress in modern theater history, one of the greats. She's also been called a self-destructive, self-sabotaging alcoholic. But it all began when she was called Patricia Kimberly Reed on February 11th, 1925, when she was born in Tularosa, New Mexico. And in the 9th grade, Patty, as she was called, acted in a high school play written by her English teacher, who she would later credit with getting her into acting. Well, actually, it was a combination of this and a performance that she saw when she was 15. See, in 1940, the film The Philadelphia Story, starring Katharine Hepburn, Jimmy Stewart, and Cary Grant, was such a big hit that the following year, in 1941, there was a national tour of a stage production of The Philadelphia Story, and Katharine Hepburn actually agreed to reprise her role. Well, Patty and her mom, they caught one of these performances, and when it was over, Patty stayed in her seat long after the curtain closed, absolutely bawling. She wasn't crying because it was sad. I mean, The Philadelphia Story is a comedy. She was bawling because it was over. A pretty sure telltale sign that someone's been bit pretty hard by the acting bug. So when Patty graduated from Albuquerque High School in 1942, she enrolled in the University of New Mexico's drama department, where she spent 2.5 years as a drama major before leaving in 1944. And the reason she left was because one of her teachers was also leaving to become a director at the Pasadena Playhouse. He and his wife, they convinced Patty to take her acting ambitions to the next level, so Patty and her mom, they packed everything up and traded in New Mexico for an apartment in Pasadena. Now, you can actually see the Pasadena Playhouse in my tours of George Reeves and, of course, Carol Burnett, but it was here that two major life events happened in Patty's life. One, she would meet the man who would become her first husband, and two, it was here that she started playing around with a stage name. Outgrowing Patty, she started using her middle name and a family name, becoming Kim Stanley. Well, she had enrolled in a 2-year program there, but ironically, she never performed in any of their productions because the school had a very strict rule that the first year, students must only focus on their classwork. They're not allowed to perform, and this just didn't fly with Kim. She didn't see the point in going to a performing school where you couldn't perform. So she basically called the school a glorified junior college, and she left. Even after she became famous, she badmouthed them and never spoke highly of them. And really, this defiance of hers, it set the stage, if you will, for many rebellious acts to come. After a very brief stint in Louisville, Kentucky with a theater troupe that quickly dissolved, the newly named Kim Stanley took her ambitions all the way to New York City. It was 1946, and the 21-year-old's first order of business was her wedding. She had been recently reintroduced to an actor from the Pasadena Playhouse named Bruce Hall. The two of them got hitched, but their marriage had only lasted about a year, and to make money, she got a job as a waitress at the Sheraton Hotel in New York City, and she found work as a model at the fashion house of Herbert Sondheim, father of another future Broadway legend, Stephen. Unfortunately, though, during the first few years in New York, Kim could not find any acting work, and to cope, she turned to alcohol, something very common in her family. In fact, they were all very worried about her, but she had her drinking under control enough to join another theater troupe in 1949, Off-Broadway, Inc., a group of actors that included Gene Saks and his future wife, an actress named Bea Arthur. Well, Bea, she would later remember Kim as being exceptionally talented in a league of her own, because she was. And Bea, she would not be the first, nor would she be the last of Kim's co-stars to rave excessively about her talents. But unfortunately, this troupe also dissolved rather quickly, and this was due to the drama around the fact that everyone started sleeping together, a habit that Kim and a lot of those crazy method actors would acquire over the years. Kim, she closed out the 1940s by finally landing a part in her very first Broadway play. It was called Monster Rat, and it was adapted by Lillian Hellman, and although she had a very tiny role, it started causing people to take notice. However, in 1950, Kim got married for a second time, this time to an actor named Kurt Conway, with whom she would have her very first child, a daughter named Lisa, born in 1951. But while she was getting married and while she was having a child, Kim was laying the groundwork for the chapter that would really define her career. See, in 1947, the legendary Actors Studio opened, thanks to Elia Kazan, and the world would get a new taste of a new style of acting called method acting. It was the place for actors to be, especially since in 1947, a young new actor named Marlon Brando arrived on the scene, completely changing the face of theater. In fact, between 1948 and 1951, over 2,000 performers auditioned for the Actors Studio, and only 30 got in. Kim Stanley was one of them. And if that wasn't enough, Lee Strasberg also joined the studio in 1948, and by 1951, he became the company's sole teacher. Now, in these early days, Kim really revered Strasberg, and he even became sort of a father figure to her. Television in the late 1940s was nothing like it is today. Everything was live, 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 live. I Love Lucy would come along in 1951, completely changing the game. But before that, all of the networks would put on these live productions. It was almost like television theater. They would put on original plays, classic plays, short dramas. Kim did so many that she became known as the queen of them, almost preferring this medium to theater because, well, A, she had a notorious stage fright that she battled her entire life, and B, she liked the cameras because she didn't have to project her voice. Sadly, though, since these were live, very few were taped, and therefore there just aren't that many out there for us to see today. In 1953, Kim Stanley finally got her big break when she was cast in a brand new play called Picnic. The 27-year-old married mother would be playing Millie Owens, age 16. But that's how good Kim Stanley was, or that's how weird theater was back then, depending on how you look at it. But not only did Kim pull it off, Picnic was a monster success. And since its Broadway debut, it has been performed in acting classes and on stage all over the world. If you're an actor who has not read Picnic or done a scene from it, are you even an actor? But my favorite thing about it is it also marked the debut of a new actor named Paul Newman, my number one favorite guy of all time, hands down my favorite actor. And here's a funny story, well, unless you're Paul's first wife, Jackie, but Kim Stanley's understudy in Picnic was a 23-year-old actress named Joanne Woodward. Paul, he would eventually fall in love with Joanne and leave his wife for her. But I mean, come on, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were one of the greatest couples of all time.
Here is a scene from the Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Picnic.
We're doing very well. Hey, Billy, come on, dance with me.
I never danced with boys. I always have to lead.
Well, you just relax and do the steps I do.
Howard, quit clowning and dance with me.
Honey, you don't get any fun out of dancing with me.
Like too bad?
No, kid. You just need a little practice. And look, kid, you gotta remember, I'm the man and the man always leads. In everything. Hey, watch this, kid. This is a new step I learned in L.A. Now you try it.
Isn't he graceful? That looks kind of hard.
Take a little time. Come on, give it a try.
I'm sort of afraid I get too hard.
Come here. Watch this. If you can get this step, you'll be the sharpest kid in town.
It's really a new step. I've been trying to teach that to Alan. Oh, look! Look, everybody nice to do it, too.
Kim left Picnic 3 months into its run because she was pregnant and the baby was not her husband's. She had had a quick fling in a New York City hotel room on New Year's Eve of 1953, 1 month before she opened in Picnic, and it was with Brooks Clift, who happened to be the brother of film star Montgomery Clift. Now, if Paul Newman is my number one guy, Montgomery Clift is number two, and he is someone I will definitely do a documentary about one day. But Kim, she went through with this pregnancy and didn't tell anyone for years that the baby wasn't her husband, Kurt's. She gave birth in September of that year, and as far as anyone was concerned, her new baby boy was Jamie Conway. Now, none of this derailed her blossoming career, however. In fact, she was about to immerse herself in what would become her signature role, the lead in a new play called Bus Stop. It opened in March of 1955, and here's something you've probably never heard before: an actor fighting to keep her name from appearing above the title. Kim, she wasn't looking for any sort of publicity. She wasn't looking to be a star. The only thing she cared about in her career was acting. She even tried to argue that Bus Stop was an ensemble and that there wasn't a star. Ironically, though, it's this performance that made her a Broadway star, and it's the performance that caused Life magazine to call her one of the first ladies of the stage. Now, also in that ensemble was another future Broadway legend, Elaine Stritch, who raved and raved about working with Kim. She had a smaller role than Kim, but the two really bonded, especially considering that they shared a common love, drinking. The two of them would go out after performances and get drunk. Someone else who absolutely loved Kim Stanley was Marilyn Monroe. She had been cast as the lead in the film version of Bus Stop, and to prepare, she really studied Kim's performance on stage. In fact, the two actresses met, and Marilyn, she raved about Kim, and Kim raved about Marilyn. She loved what she saw so much that it even caused her to join the Actors Studio, where Lee Strasberg very infamously took her under his wing, and, well, in my opinion, he ruined her, but I'll save that for a story in a Marilyn Monroe documentary one day. By the mid-1950s, Kim's marriage to Kurt Conway was completely over, and now she was living with a man named Alfred Ryder, with whom she would have a daughter named Lori Rachel, born in 1956. Alfred, he would be the third actor that Kim would marry, and none of these actors would have a career coming remotely close to that of Kim Stanley's. Now a mother of three, Kim did something that she never wanted to do, something she had no desire to be part of, something that completely turned her off. She starred in a Hollywood movie. It was called The Goddess, and it was written by Patty Chayefsky, and it was released in the summer of 1958. Now, you'll never hear anyone talk about The Goddess without mentioning that it's loosely based on the life of Marilyn Monroe. However, always one to defend Marilyn, Kim denied ever even having her in mind when she made the movie, and I kind of believe it because Patty himself even said he didn't have Marilyn in mind when he was writing the role of a poor child who would grow up to become an actress adored by millions, yet unhappy in her own personal life. Kim, she said that she was thinking more about Rita Hayworth and Judy Garland, but there were several problems during the making of this movie, but none as big as the fact that when Kim saw a finished cut, she ran out of the screening room at Columbia Studios in absolute horror. She hated herself, she hated her performance, she hated the movie. She wanted nothing to do with it, and she flat out told the studio that she wouldn't promote it, and she didn't.
This is the typewriter of Patty Chayefsky, and this is the face of Kim Stanley, probably the greatest actress of our time.
God is with man, and he will dwell.
Joined together in one of the most extraordinary films ever made. This is the story of a woman who became a movie star.
I make $4,000 a week now, Mama. Do you know that?
It is the whole uncompromising story of her life. The Goddess explores the desperate demeaning of love.
You love me.
And how it becomes the business of fame.
Why don't you come to my house tonight and we'll discuss the whole matter?
The Goddess exposes the final triumph.
Oh, sleeping pills. Rita, where is the bottle, baby?
Save me, please save me.
The Goddess, through the story of one woman, is the public disrobing of a generation. You will never forget it. The Goddess, starring Kim Stanley and Lloyd Bridges.
Kim basically found herself running out of that Columbia Studios screening room and right onto the London stage, where she gave 132 performances as Maggie in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. And just like Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor found herself in the audience, watching, observing, studying Kim Stanley before playing Maggie in the film version of Tennessee Williams's masterpiece. And also like Marilyn, Elizabeth Taylor went backstage and met with Kim. She flat out said to her, "When I film the movie, I'm gonna steal a couple things from you." And Kim replied, "Go ahead, be my guest, we all do." Also that year, 1958, Kim starred in a play in New York called A Touch of the Poet alongside the great Helen Hayes. Unfortunately, though, that play got a lot of bad press because the two women did not get along at all. And it's funny, though, because this would mark the very first time that Helen Hayes would be acting on the very stage at the very theater that had just been renamed in her honor. And of course, the Helen Hayes Theater still exists in Manhattan today. But in addition to Helen being an absolute nightmare for Kim, there was an actor in the play who, perhaps acting out his own frustrations, physically slapped Kim. Well, that did it. She said, "No way, I'm out." She left the play and was replaced by a young actress named Cloris Leachman. Kim Stanley's problem wasn't that she was a rude, overbearing Broadway diva. Her problem was that she was a method actor who took that style of acting to a level so deep that it really ruined her psyche. Many of the method actors suffered from this. However, the men, they usually got away with it. They were referred to as cool and dark and edgy, which is actually how Kim Stanley got the nickname the female Brando. She, however, went so over the top with it that sometimes she would confide in her co-stars that she thought she was losing her mind. Take that and add excessive alcohol, a mounting alcohol problem, and you have a recipe for intensity, which is probably why Sidney Pollack was shocked to learn how much he liked working with her when he directed her in a 2-part episode of Ben Casey, a very underrated medical drama long before ER. It ran from 1961 to 1966, and unlike the dozens and dozens of times that Kim had acted on television, this was going to be like the 1-hour dramas that we know today, taped. All those other times were basically like, live theater with cameras there just to capture the performance. But this was going to be a lot different. This was going to be cut and action and cut and action. And it also meant that Kim was going to have to go to a soundstage in Hollywood, Desilu Studios to be exact, and this absolutely petrified her. Kim checked into the Chateau Marmont, not too far from here, when she came out to film Ben Casey, and when Sidney Pollack went to meet with her, she started having serious doubts. She didn't understand why she even got cast in this role. She told Sidney, "I can't act like this. I have to play a character from start to finish. I can't cut and rematch dialogue for close-ups and then do it again at different angles." Well, he calmed her down, and he also came up with a brilliant conclusion. He decided to use 4 cameras, and he set them up, getting every angle that he wanted, so that Kim could do as much acting as possible without having to cater to the television drama format. But my absolute favorite thing about this, and it's one of my favorite things about her actually, despite being such a strong method actor, when the network executives came to her, they said, "Kim, look, you're playing an attorney with a heroin addiction. Can you please lose 6 pounds?" She said, "Nope," and she didn't. And they hired her anyway, and not only did she pull off a brilliant performance, but Variety and The Hollywood Reporter gave her absolute glowing reviews, and she won her first Emmy, the Best Actress in a Single Performance. But how about this? While she was out here filming Ben Casey, Kim recorded a very small but very pivotal role in the now classic film To Kill a Mockingbird. The narrator that you hear in that movie, that's Kim Stanley. She agreed to do the part on one condition, though, that she wouldn't receive any credit, and she didn't. Not only that, she received $500, a one-time sum, for her work in that movie. To Kill a Mockingbird would not be the only film that Kim worked on that year. She decided once again, somewhat reluctantly, to star in a film. And the one she chose was called Seance on a Wet Afternoon. In it, she plays a batshit crazy psychic, a medium who convinces her husband, played by the brilliant Richard Attenborough, to kidnap the daughter of a very wealthy couple so that Kim, as the psychic, could show up, work with the police, and prove to the world what powers she had. It's a genius plot. It's a really fun watch. Kim is absolutely wonderful in it. The New York Film Critics, they thought the same thing when they awarded her the Best Actress of 1964. She actually beat out Julie Andrews for Mary Poppins and Audrey Hepburn for My Fair Lady. The Academy, they loved her performance too, and they gave her a Best Actress Oscar nomination, but this time she did not beat Julie Andrews, and it should come as no surprise when I tell you that Kim did not attend the Academy Awards. Those kinds of shows, they just weren't her thing, but this time she actually liked her performance and she liked the movie. I think this had a lot to do with the fact that when she filmed it at the legendary Pinewood Studios in London, the director, he filmed it in chronological order so that Kim could act her character from start to finish, all the way through.
Was it magic or murder they planned at that seance on a wet afternoon?
When will I see her again?
What strange plan entered the mind of Myra Savage? What made her devoted husband so afraid?
Oh, God, oh, Jesus, take him, Lord, it's too late.
Kim Stanley and Richard Attenborough each can claim a personal triumph. They are remarkable. Their performances merit a dozen or more Oscars.
Although her marriage to Alfred Ryder had run dry a few years prior, the two weren't officially divorced until 1964, and later that year, Kim got married again. Her fourth and final marriage this time was not to an actor, but to an attorney named Joseph Siegel. Kim, she was 39 and he was 35. Now, if she thought a divorce for the third time was rough, well, she had no idea what was about to happen to her career. The decline began when she signed on to play Masha in Chekhov's classic play Three Sisters. Three Sisters actually made its debut way back in 1901, and it had been put on countless times up until this point, but this staging would take place in New York City at the Morosco Theater, and Kim, she would star alongside the brilliant Geraldine Page and Shirley Knight, and it would be directed by Lee Strasberg. Well, Kim, she pulled a Kim and threatened to walk when Strasberg tried to cast his, very annoying daughter, Susan, in a role. She said, absolutely not. If you cast her, I'm out. Well, Lee didn't cast her and Kim stayed. Thank God, too, because Susan, she wasn't a good actress. It was nepotism at its finest. Susan, she went on to write two, in my opinion, exploitive books about her friendship with Marilyn Monroe. Really, like Kim Stanley, I'm just not a fan. But the play was brilliant. It was very well received. In fact, they filmed a staging of it as a fundraiser for the Actors Studio. Shirley Knight couldn't make it, so Sandy Dennis filled in for her. And if you watched Carol Burnett when she was on my show, you know I am a huge fan of Sandy Dennis. She's one of my favorite actresses, and thankfully that filming has survived, and it's on YouTube in its entirety.
Oh, he's up to something.
Yes, he went out looking solemn. Plainly, he's about to bring you a present.
Oh, what a nuisance. Isn't it awful? He's always doing something silly.
By a curved sea strand, a green oak stands, chain of gold upon it. Is it a chain of gold?
You're not in a very cheerful mood today, Marcia. Where are you going?
To walk out on a birthday party.
Oh, what difference does it make? I'll be back this evening. I wish you all over again. May you always be well and happy. You know, in the old days, when Father was alive, there used to be 30, 40 officers in this house on our birthday, and lots of noise. Today, there's a man and a half, and it's silent as a tomb. You don't pay attention to me. I'm miserable and I'm depressed. I'll talk to you later.
Marcia, why would you, dear Marcia?
If a man philosophizes, you get philosophy or something that looks like philosophy. But if a woman philosophizes, or two do, you might just as well suck your thumb.
Now, what is that supposed to mean, you terribly dreadful man?
Now you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound that bad, but despite Kim's protests, Lee Strasberg unfortunately decided to take the production for a 10-day run to the London stage. Well, it has gone down as one of the most horrifically embarrassing disasters in the modern era of theater. On opening night, actor George C. Scott, who was now in the role, looked out to the audience from backstage, and when he saw that his girlfriend, actress Ava Gardner, who he would repeatedly get drunk and beat, was not in her seat, he got so mad that he notoriously chugged a bottle of liquor before going on stage. Well, you can just imagine how horrific his performance was, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that the English audience saw right through this method acting baloney, as they called it. They mocked it, they didn't take it seriously. They were used to having English actors, very highbrow actors, taking on these roles, and they were damned if a bunch of Yankees were gonna come to town. They booed, they hissed, worst of all, they laughed. When Sandy Dennis uttered her line, "It's been a terrible evening," someone in the audience shouted, "It sure has." They were relentless, and worst of all, the critics trashed them. This group of actors who were used to being revered by American audiences were now being gutted and trashed overseas. Well, they managed to finish their run, but it had taken its toll on Kim. In fact, that May 22nd performance in 1964 marked the very last time that Lee Strasberg would direct. It marked the end of the Actors Studio, as it was known, and worst of all, it marked the very last time that Kim Stanley would ever act on stage again. I know I keep teasing you with the Highland Estates, but we have to take a quick little detour within Hollywood Heights, though, because, well, there's still more to go over, and I'm going to try to walk quickly and talk quickly. After the whole debacle with the three sisters, Kim, she took a trip out here to LA to visit actor friends Janice Rule and Ben Gazzara, who were living in Westwood. Apparently, Kim's drinking was so bad and so out of control that the two actors had her committed to a psych ward right down the street from them at UCLA. But when they went to visit her, Kim, she wasn't very angry. She knew she needed help, and she even made jokes and made Ben sign autographs for other women in the ward who loved the TV show that he was on at the time. And her stint at UCLA didn't last long, and when she returned to the East Coast, her actor friend Roddy McDowell arranged for her to go to a rehab in Maryland. Well, Paul Newman and Geraldine Page were among the friends who chipped in to pay the bill because Kim, who never had a head for money, was absolutely flat broke. And it turns out that Kim, she wasn't a real big fan of rehab. And we know that when Kim wasn't a fan of something, she left. She actually convinced them to let her leave for Thanksgiving weekend, and she never went back. She left them behind. She may have also left the theater behind, but that didn't mean that she left her career. She did a TV movie in 1968 called Flesh and Blood with Robert Duvall, directed by Arthur Penn. And in 1970, she did another one called Dragon Country, written by her good friend Tennessee Williams. She also did some guest work on a couple of episodes of the CBS series Medical Center. And she did an episode of NBC's Night Gallery in 1971. Actually, a whole lot happened in between those gigs as well. Her fourth and final marriage to Joseph Siegel fell apart, and during all of that, she decided to tell her son that his father was really Brooks Clift. Well, 1972 rolled around, and with her children at boarding school and with New York City having nothing left to offer Kim, she decided to move back to New Mexico. After a while, though, Kim started missing acting, so in 1975, she began teaching and directing theater at the College of Santa Fe. But she didn't have to worry about missing New York, because New York, well, they came to her. Her dear friends, Maureen Stapleton and Gregory Peck, showed up to perform in Waiting for Godot, which Kim directed, and she also directed Bus Stop. That had to be pretty trippy, being on the other side as a director this time. And not only that, but Marlon Brando, by way of Winnebago, by the way, he even came to visit and see Kim and her students at the school. She was really happy teaching, but she still had an alcohol problem, and because of it, the College of Santa Fe asked her in 1977 not to return for the following school year. So, in a very strange move, Kim returned to New York in 1978. And when Lee Strasberg heard how desolate she was, he offered her a teaching job at the, Lee Strasberg Institute, of course. And despite her blaming him for the way the three sisters turned out, Kim reluctantly took the job. And she regretted it almost instantly, telling the press that Lee Strasberg was a hack and that now being a millionaire meant that he was even less talented. Well, needless to say, she also lost that job. She also tried private classes where her drinking led to once throwing a shoe at student Lauren Hutton, and apparently Kim would get drunk and call her students at night to let them know just how bad they were. Ooh, well, things were only getting worse, so once again, Kim decided to leave New York, and this time, when she moved back to New Mexico, she moved to her hometown of Albuquerque in 1978, where her career would be put on hold for a few years until the film world would come calling once again for a project that would bring her right here to the Magic Castle Hotel on Franklin Avenue at the foot of Hollywood Heights. We're going to come back here later and do a proper tour of this hotel, as well as the Magic Castle, which you just saw on our way here a minute ago. We'll go inside and I will show you the incredible ice cream and popsicle perks that come with staying here. It's truly magical. However, it was actually just called the Magic Hotel when Kim Stanley arrived here to shoot her first film in 18 years. It was 1982, and in my research, I found out that the manager of the hotel at the time had two teenage twin sons, Chris and Roger, who lived with him right next door in the apartment building, the one on the right, from 1974 to 1984. And how about this? I found one of them on Facebook and I reached out to him, Roger, and he could not have been any nicer. He actually writes a blog and talks all about growing up here, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we come back. Not only that, though, he and his twin brother have a podcast, and he sent me a link to where they reminisce about some of the guests who stayed here, and one of them was Kim Stanley. They said that their dad had become quite friendly with her and that the two of them would share a bottle of wine and act out scenes from Noel Coward plays. Their dad didn't even drink, but that's how much he wanted to hang with Kim. I chatted with Roger for a bit, and when I asked him if he remembered which unit Kim stayed in, he answered immediately, saying that you go in, make your first right, and it's the last one on the right on the first floor with a balcony facing Franklin, which means it was the corner unit right here on the end. Kim was very apprehensive about signing on to make another film, not just for all the reasons that we've already talked about, but also because she had another unfortunate mishap just a few years prior. Tony Richardson, the husband of Vanessa Redgrave, who had directed Kim on stage, asked her to play a part in a film that he was directing called A Delicate Balance, written by Edward Albee. Not only that, but this would give Kim the chance to act with her childhood idol, Katharine Hepburn. Well, she accepted the role with the promise that she would quit drinking and lose weight. But when she arrived in England to stay with Tony and Vanessa, it was clear that she hadn't lost weight, nor had she stopped drinking. And evidently, she gave a batshit bonkers performance at the reading held at the Richardson home, and when it got back to Katharine Hepburn, she withdrew from the movie. Kim was devastated and tried desperately to set up a meeting so she could explain herself, but Miss Hepburn declined, and when Kim and the movie eventually parted ways, Hepburn signed back on and actually made the movie. I mean, could you imagine your idol quitting a project because you were too drunk to work with? Well, Kim made a much better impression on director Graham Clifford, who got Kim's permission to meet with her for coffee after tracking her down and calling her in the spring of 1981. He flew all the way to New Mexico just to tell her about a movie he was directing about 1940s movie star Frances Farmer. Now, had this meeting been several years earlier, one might think that he had Kim in mind for the role of Frances, considering how absolutely unbelievable the comparisons are between the two ladies, but no, Clifford had Kim in mind for the role of Frances's mother, a really substantial and key role in the film, as Frances Farmer's real-life mother was a very substantial and key part of her life. Well, Clifford, he heard the rumors about Kim, her drinking, her weight, but he found her to be charming and eager to tackle this role. He offered her the part, she accepted, and flew back out here to Hollywood, where she moved into this hotel in 1982. One of the craziest things about the movie Frances is that the production company behind it was Brooks Films, as in Mel Brooks, the genius of comedy, producing one of the heaviest, most dramatic films of the 1980s. He knew this too, which is why, although he was an executive producer, he kept his name off of the movie credits. Kim, she was actually the first one cast in the film, and according to cinema folklore, casting the role of Frances was a chore. They'll tell you that Jane Fonda, Liza Minnelli, Sissy Spacek, Tuesday Weld, Diane Keaton, Goldie Hawn, Meryl Streep, and Natalie Wood all campaigned for the part. They very well all could have, but Graham, he was the editor on 1981's The Postman Always Rings Twice. So it's no surprise that he ended up casting Jack Nicholson's love interest in that movie, a relatively newcomer named Jessica Lange. And according to Kim Stanley's daughter, when Jessica was cast, Kim apparently said, "Oh no, not that model from King Kong." See, up until that point, Jessica had only done a few movies. King Kong, All That Jazz, How to Beat the High Cost of Living, and Postman. But Frances would mark the first time that Jessica Lange would carry a movie on her own. Kim Stanley arrived here 50 pounds lighter than she had been when she met Graham Clifford at that New Mexico coffee shop, thanks to a liquid diet. And her first task in order to play Lillian Farmer was to spend 2 weeks with Jessica Lange, getting to know one another prior to filming. And the two actresses, they hit it off immediately. Whereas Kim initially didn't have faith in Jessica as an actress, Jessica had been a huge fan of Kim's. In fact, Jessica has said in many interviews that The Goddess had been one of her favorite movies and that she would watch it before auditions to amp her up. Kim, she quickly changed her tune upon meeting Jessica. The two swam together, they baked together, and they even improv'd with each other all day in character as mother and daughter. And it paid off because what they did together on screen, it's just wonderful. If you haven't seen Frances, you are missing one of the greatest star-making performances out there. Jessica Lange is just exquisite, as always, but this movie, it took her and it put her in an entirely different realm and gave her a life-changing career.
Working with Kim Stanley was still one of the best experiences I've ever had. She was just like, it was like, wow, here we go. Ah, yes. It was thrilling. Well, with Kim, you know, she wanted to do this thing because we had both come, I mean, she was really a huge part of the Actors Studio. I had studied with somebody who was part of the Actors Studio, but I had never been I'd never actually worked directly with Strasberg, but she wanted to do this thing for Frances where we would work for like a couple weeks ahead of time, just improv all day long, from the morning till night, just in character, and at different points in the lives of these, so that by the time we hit the set, we had this history and this kind of texture to the relationship. It was great, and just being in her presence and watching how she worked and her devotion and her like rawness and the honesty, and I mean, it was thrilling.
Right next door there, that's the hotel where Janis Joplin died of a drug overdose in 1970, 12 years before Kim arrived. Janis and Frances Farmer, two tragic heroines of pop culture. Frances was, well, it's impossible to sum her up in a sentence or two. She was a very troubled movie star who found herself in a lot of trouble. She was, I think, manic depressive, maybe bipolar. She had bouts of schizophrenia. She drank, she fought, she yelled, she punched a makeup lady, or maybe it was a hairdresser on a film set once, and it all played out in public. And Jessica Lange, who, I mean, come on, looked exactly like the real Frances Farmer, said that playing her was like having a nervous breakdown every single day. She herself even admitted later that she went a little crazy on set, taking the role perhaps a little too seriously. Who does that sound like? Our friend Kim. Well, she recognized this behavior in Jessica, and she took her aside, basically saying, no, you don't have to do this, all of this, trust me. She kind of stepped in and quieted the noise. Tensions were rising with Jessica and Graham Clifford, and he went on to later say that he was very grateful for the way that Kim handled some of Jessica's behavior. And I wonder if it helped Jessica or made her even crazier that while this movie was being filmed, she was also falling in love with one of her co-stars, actor and playwright Sam Shepard. The two met on this film, but they actually kept their relationship pretty hush-hush during filming. Jessica had recently ended a 6-year relationship with dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov, but this This budding romance with Sam Shepard, it wasn't just a fling. The two would stay together for 27 years. Frances isn't, I wouldn't call it a great film. It's a good film filled with great performances. Actors you could just watch all day long. Unfortunately, though, it suffered from editing and I think writing problems. Several of the scenes between Kim and Jessica, they hit the cutting room floor. There were also a lot of disagreements between Graham Clifford and Universal Studios, and as a result, the movie suffered financially when it was released in December of 1982. And the film, it already has a running time well over 2 hours, but apparently about a half hour's worth of scenes between Frances and her mother were cut. And what's awful is that Graham, who had held on to the cut footage for years, said that it was accidentally thrown out during a storage unit move a few years back. But the one thing that the critics did agree on was that Jessica Lange and Kim Stanley were terrific. Jessica, she even got some of the best reviews of her career. In fact, 1982 was quite the stellar year for Miss Lange, because guess what other movie was released the same weekend as Frances? The one she made immediately after Frances wrapped, Tootsie. Directed, of course, by Kim's Ben Casey director, Sidney Pollack. Wow, Tootsie and Frances, two of her biggest films, both released on the same weekend. Jessica Lange would be rewarded for both of her performances in 1982 by receiving not one, but 2 Academy Award nominations that year. Best Actress for Frances and Best Supporting Actress for Tootsie. And in the latter category, her competition would be Kim Stanley, along with Terry Garr for Tootsie, Glenn Close for The World According to Garp, and Leslie Ann Warren for Victor Victoria. When the Oscars aired on April 11th, 1983, Sigourney Weaver and Robert Mitchum announced Jessica Lange as the supporting actress of that year. Surprisingly, though, Kim actually attended the Oscars. Not, however, the Golden Globes, where both actresses were also nominated. And don't get me wrong, Jessica Lange is terrific in Tootsie. In fact, I don't know if the movie would be as perfect as it is if she hadn't played that character as seriously as she did. But I do think that winning was her consolation prize for not being awarded the Best Actress award for Frances, an almost impossible achievement when you're up against Meryl Streep for Sophie's Choice. But neither Julie Andrews for Victor Victoria, Sissy Spacek for Missing, nor Deborah Winger in An Officer and a Gentleman had a chance against Meryl. I didn't really go into Kim's family life, you're welcome, because there's really a lot to unpack there, especially with her dad. A typical case of the daughter not getting enough of her father's love and approval. So it frustrates me that at 92, he died in Albuquerque just a few months before Kim filmed Frances. And her mom died on Halloween of that same year, and she too never got to see the release of Frances. She'd been separated from Kim's dad and died in a nursing home here in Hollywood, not too far from here on Fairfax Avenue. And I'm not done. Kim also lost her brother that year. Her parents and her brother. None of them got to see her return to the screen and get another Oscar nomination. She was close with her mom, but she really didn't have too much to say when she was asked about her dad's passing. Kim was 57 years old when she lost a majority of her family, but it didn't stop her from working. She returned to television at the insistence, or rather the persistence, of Jack Klugman. He had worked with Kim on stage back in 1949, and when he learned that Kim was living in Hollywood, he drove to her house to convince her to do a guest spot on his show, Quincy M.E. This was the 8th and final season of the hit NBC medical mystery, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. But here's the thing. By the end of 1982, Kim had left the Magic Hotel and moved into a house in Beechwood Canyon. I went there and took a video of it to show it to you because it's still there, tucked away under the Hollywood sign, but she only lived there for a few months, and I really want to contain her story to Hollywood Heights. But that's where she was living when she accepted Jack's invitation, and once again, she would be playing a psychic, a real psychic this time, not someone pretending to be one. And it's really such a great episode because, well, she just plays it so real. The writing is very dated and very silly, but when you watch it, her acting, her realness, it just makes it feel current, timeless, really. And, you know, the reason Kim took these TV jobs was, well, first of all, she needed the work. She needed the money. Oh, in fact, a lot of times she would let her Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA memberships lapse, and when she would book these gigs, her friends and sometimes her agent would front the money so she could pay her guild dues. But the other reason she did television was because, like theater, she assumed that her performances would be seen and then vanish into the ether, never to be seen again. I mean, sure, there were reruns, but nobody back then, even in the 80s, thought that there would ever be an opportunity for these television shows to live on forever. There was no internet, there weren't even DVDs, no box sets, none of that. And this, it wasn't a case of, oh, I'm too good for TV, I'm a real actress. No, it came from straight up vanity. She didn't like the way she looked. She knew she had horrible teeth. The thought of going to a dentist absolutely petrified her. She just didn't think she was beautiful. Her weight, it fluctuated a lot, and she never even watched any of the footage as she filmed. With the movies, too, Graham Clifford even said that he doesn't even think she even saw Frances when it came out. Maybe that's why I love her so much, because we both have crooked bottom teeth. But anyway, her insecurities, they didn't stop her from her pure passion, acting. That was something that would never leave her body. Really, any authentic, true actor will tell you the same thing. And as a matter of fact, Kim made a very interesting choice in 1983 when she decided that New Mexico wasn't for her anymore. Neither was New York. So she left her place in Beechwood Canyon and decided to make a more permanent home for herself right here in Hollywood on Hillcrest Road. And it's an interesting choice because for someone so, I don't know, afraid of Hollywood, someone who wanted nothing to do with it, she made 1914 her home for 12 years. Well, we finally made it to the Highland Estates. You didn't know you had the patience, did you? You're probably like, I didn't. I skipped to this part. Well, either way, here we are at 1914, and we're gonna start right here in the front, but just wait till you see around back. It's really a very special property. And you know, usually on these tours, you hear me say these incredibly old dates, and you think, there's no way that looked like that back then, but I have to say that this one, well, it looks like it was built in 1912. And I mean that in the best possible way. I mean, she looks outstanding for 113. The restoration was done just magnificently, keeping the original style and the soul of the house with minimal modern upgrades. It's like faces. Some people, they just do too much, but not these 3 buildings back here. It's kind of like stepping back in time. And normally I wouldn't choose such a dark paint color, but you'll see how well it works with the lush greenery that surrounds it. Plus, the inside is totally white. Even the hardwood floors, they're very, very light. We're actually looking at 2 different homes here. 1914 is right up these steps, and it offers 2,800 square feet of living space with 3 bedrooms, and this is just heaven to me, 3 bathrooms. Just perfect. And oh wow, I just noticed this great lamppost next to the green doored garage. Oh yeah, parking. More perfection. I can definitely see why Kim Stanley moved in and didn't leave for over a decade. Right before Kim moved into the second story here in 1983, she had completed a very small role in what would be her 4th and final film, playing a bar owner named Pancho Barnes in The Right Stuff. The film, directed by Philip Kaufman, was released while Kim was living here, and it went on to receive 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, winning 4 of them, one of which was for Bill Conti's amazing score. It's not really a film, though, that you would expect Kim to appear in. It's a big-budget, action-y movie based on Tom Wolfe's book about United States pilots and astronauts. Kim's character appears scattered throughout the movie here and there, basically whenever the guys need a drink, but it would reunite her with her Francis co-star, Sam Shepard. He received a supporting actor nomination for his role and has a very fun but brief scene with Kim, and it just gives me chills when I see them working together. 2 of the most prolific actors in modern theater history, just brilliant. And although she's in the movie for what I think is under 4 minutes of total screen time, she just manages to stand out and remain memorable with some very fun looks that I just love. It's a fun watch. The cast is amazing. Barbara Hershey, Scott Glenn, Ed Harris, Fred Ward, Veronica Cartwright, some really great actors. The Right Stuff, however, would mark the very last time that Kim Stanley would ever appear again in a motion picture. I was walking so quickly back from the Magic Castle Hotel that I forgot to tell you that Kim also guest starred on a sitcom right before she moved in. I can't imagine that, although it was filmed before a live studio audience, so perhaps she loved it. It was only on for 1 season, and if anyone out there has it, let me know, because I'm dying to see it. It was called It Takes Two, and it was brought to television by the same crew who would go on to bring us the Golden Girls a few years later. Susan Harris was the creator, and Jay Sandrich directed it. Up until then, he was probably most known for directing the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And not only did they have a top-notch crew, but the cast was just stellar. It starred Richard Crenna and Patty Duke, who I also forgot to mention when we were in the park, played the little girl version of Kim's character in The Goddess. In fact, it was 8-year-old Patty Duke's film debut. So I'm sure that had to be a wild reunion for the 2 actresses. But get this, rounding out the cast were 2 future megastars of NBC, 2 brilliant, brilliant actors, Anthony Edwards and Helen Hunt. Anthony, of course, is heavily featured in my Miracle Mile tour, and of course, I'm going to have to tell you that I was also in an episode of Mad About You. Not only did I get to meet Helen Hunt, but Mel Brooks was in my scene. Yes, Francis producer Mel Brooks. I actually got to talk to him for a while. He was just a wonderful, brilliant man. But anyway, one last thing about It Takes Two. If it's ever mentioned today, it's because of the fact that the show used the same kitchen set that would go on to be used in the Golden Girls. That is basically its remaining legacy. The current residents living in 1914 were so nice to let me back here. The woman who answered my letter, she hadn't heard of Kim Stanley, but was more than accommodating because she referred to this little oasis as, well, an artist's colony. You basically have to be a creative type to live back here, and she and her husband, who I met quickly, seemed just so delighted that the person I was doing this story on was an artist herself. Just the loveliest couple, and I thank them immensely. You know, it's so nice to see a gorgeous home like this and know that it's being occupied by such great people. And of course, from here you can see just exactly how this duplex situation works. The people who lived below Kim would come in this way, and Kim's entrance, we just saw, was in the front. You really get an idea of just how big Kim's unit was, too, up there on the second floor, where she was living when she acted for the very last time on camera. Not only did she reunite with Sam Shepard from Frances, but Kim also signed on to work again opposite Sam's lady, Jessica Lange, in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, with a relatively new and up-and-comer named Tommy Lee Jones. The two actresses, they really remained friends after Frances. Jessica revered Kim, really looked up to her, and this time the two ladies would be bringing the characters of Kim's pal, Tennessee Williams, to life, which was set to air on a new cable network called Showtime. Jessica would be playing Maggie the Cat, the role that Kim slayed on stage in London, and Kim, this time around, would be playing Big Mama. It was a TV movie filmed as a play over the course of 1 week here in LA at the historic KCET studios on Sunset Boulevard. And apparently there were some really high tensions on set due to the fact that none of the actors, particularly Tommy Lee Jones, were getting along with Rip Torn, who was playing Big Daddy. And at this stage of her career, Kim was the calming force on set, the one who sort of brought everyone together, which I guess one could say she was doing in character as Big Mama. Either way, the cast and crew were extremely grateful to her, and Kim was the only one out of 7 Emmy nominations to take one home. On September 22nd, 1985, she won the Best Supporting Actress in a limited series. She didn't attend, but her second and final Emmy would make its way to the second floor of this bungalow, where it would sit next to the one that she had won over 20 years earlier for Ben Casey. Not a bad way to seal the lid on a career lasting 36 years.
Big Mama? Here I come! Through May and Gooper's gallery door. Where's Brett? Oh. Son! Hurry on out of there, son! Just have a second. I came up to tell you the news about Big Daddy. Oh, I hate locked doors in a house.
I have noticed that you do, Big Mama, but people need some moments of privacy, don't they?
No, ma'am, not in my house. What you took your dress off for? I thought that little lace dress looked so sweet on you, honey.
Well, I did too, but one of my cute little table partners used it for napkins.
Oh.
You know, Big Mama, Man Gooper's so touchy about those children, you just wouldn't dare to suggest that there might be any room for improvement.
Brett, hurry on out. Shoot, Maggie, you just don't like children.
That is not so. I adore them. Well brought up.
Well, why don't you have some then and bring them up well instead of all the time picking on Goofers and Mays.
Hey, Big Mama, Bits and Hugh got to go. They're waiting to tell you goodbye.
Well, tell them to hold their horses. I'll be down in a jiffy.
Yes, ma'am.
Son, we just got the full report from the Oxnard Clinic. Completely negative, son. Everything negative all the way down the line. nothing wrong with him except a little thing called spastic colon. Son, can you hear me?
He can hear you, Big Mama.
Oh, why don't he say something? Good Lord, news like that ought to make him shout. Made me shout, I can tell you. I shouted and sobbed and fell down on my knees. See, the bruises where I hit my kneecaps. Took 2 doctors to haul me back on my feet. Big Daddy was just furious with me, but ain't that wonderful news? Oh.
Big Mama!
Oh, hold those people down there. Don't let them go.
There's really no clear cut and dry answer as to why Kim never acted again professionally. I mean, just as it seemed that things were oddly just getting going with the back-to-back success of Frances and The Right Stuff, followed by another Emmy win. But I don't know, saying it out loud now, I maybe wonder if she just wanted to go out on top. And just because she quit professionally didn't deter her from fulfilling her passion to act. However, if you saw Kim Stanley act anytime after 1984, you could have only seen it done on this property. As soon as she moved in here in 1983, she began, well, I almost said teaching acting, but if you said that to her, Kim would have stopped you in your tracks. She once told an interviewer, a man by the name of John Grissom in 1992, that acting cannot be taught. You're either born with it or you're not. She said that a coach, in her case, could only enhance the gift that you've been given, but that you have to have talent. And anybody who didn't have talent had no business being in a class or anywhere near a stage. Could you imagine thinking you had talent, but then you get here to one of Kim's classes and she's like, get out. I mean, I have no idea if that ever happened, but you never know. Her students, though, well, let me put it this way. Jessica Lange wasn't the only one to worship at the altar of Kim Stanley. Her students did too. As a matter of fact, Jessica Lange was one of them. She came to this bungalow several times to be coached by Kim. Kim's old actor studio pal Shelley Winters did too. I mean, famous actors and new actors were guided by her. She had groupies almost. These young actors who were learning all about method acting and the actor's studio, just dying for the chance to work with her. There's a really good book called Female Brando, a biography of Kim written by John Crampner that it's just great. I highly recommend it if you want to learn more about her. Although word on the street is that Kim absolutely hated being called a female Brando. But in it, he interviews some of the actors and neighbors who were present here during the period in which Kim lived here, and they really all just gushed about her for the most part. I mean, you know, by the 1980s and 90s, people were very nostalgic for the 1950s, Kim's era. And, you know, everyone she worked with had absolute legend status. Marilyn, Marlon, Montgomery Clift, all those actors, even as they're known still, they were just iconic. And actors, they wanted to be part of that. Just look at the success of Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton. That show actually debuted while Kim was living here. John's book, it also talks about how some of Kim's students got, well, infatuated with her. So much so that some of them even tried to step in and sort of be her caretaker, even trying to get her sober, trying to get her to go to AA meetings in Hollywood, but none of them really ever completely got through to her. One of her students who signed up to take classes in 1991 was a young actress named Anna Gunn, who would go on to win 2 Emmys of her own playing Skylar in Breaking Bad. She recalled that, she would just give her all in class, spilling her guts, leaving her soul on the floor, exercising every last emotion. And Kim would say, there's still more. She was a really tough, intense coach, but I mean, it definitely paid off. Look where it took Anna. There are a couple funny stories in the female Brando book about the classes that Kim held here. Apparently, one of the neighbors was walking by her place one day when he looked up into that big window into her living room where class was being conducted, and he saw Kim being held at gunpoint, begging for her life. Well, he didn't know they were acting, so he ran inside his house and actually called the police. I mean, imagine that kind of power to have as an acting coach in front of your students. You're so good that the neighbor calls the police on you. And it wouldn't be the last time either. Anna Gunn recalled the cops busting in with guns drawn because two of the students in her class had apparently taken their scene outside to Hillcrest, where they apparently took a prop gun and carried out this big, elaborate fight scene that, I mean, obviously would alarm any neighbor. And Anna said that when the cops showed up, Kim was basically like, "Officers, do you mind? We're working." And while these classes were, I'm sure, very cathartic and fulfilling for Kim the actress, Kim the person had bills to pay. She didn't coach for free. And rumor has it that her $1,500 a month rent was taken care of by her good friend Roddy McDowell, who got her into that Maryland rehab. They were very close. He was actually her date to the Oscars when she was nominated for Frances. Again, though, I don't know how true it is, but I do know that Kim was not financially well off. I mean, she couldn't really live off of her residual checks because there weren't that many. Honestly, most of the performances that she gave in her career were done on stage in the theater, and those performances, they just vanish when the curtain closes. You don't get paid for them years later. She just wasn't financially successful from a career that she gave so much to. Like I said, Kim lived here for 12 years. The first half of that duration was quite different from the latter half. There was a gay couple, a male couple, who lived right below Kim on the first floor, right here in the now vacant, by the way, 1912 unit. They lived here for the entire run of Kim's stay. They were both interviewed for John Crampner's book and recalled memories of their time living underneath Kim. Some fun and some heartbreaking. Apparently, the first 5 or 6 years were really rough as far as her alcoholism went. The guys would hear empty liquor bottles falling from her bed to the floor above them. And they, like her students, really worried about Kim. One time they brought her a carton of milk, assuming that she had been only drinking booze, and when Kim opened the door, she guzzled the entire carton and then thanked them before shutting the door. They were just heartsick to see her that way, but recalled that she managed to get herself together for classes or whenever she'd have visitors. They said they remembered Jessica Lange coming here, and that sometimes these classes would go on for hours. Ugh, what I wouldn't give to have taken one of her classes. I mean, I'm sure she was a handful and probably upset a lot of actors, but I mean, hey, what perfect preparation for show business. Anna Gunn said that she believed Kim had stopped drinking by the time she took acting classes here. Even if that is the case, by then, 1991, Kim had become a total recluse. The former owner of this property said that Kim didn't leave for anyone or anything. Her kids, though, would often visit, and she would receive friends and students, but she really never left the grounds. Some people say it's because she couldn't really. She had gained so much weight that it was hard for her to get around. The couple below her became very close to her. She would recount stories from her theater days to them, and she sort of became attached and a little dependent on them. Apparently, in the spring of 1992, when riots broke out following the Rodney King verdict, things around this neighborhood got a little dicey. Nearby Hollywood Boulevard was affected, as were some stores on Highland, and fearing fires, some of the neighbors began hosing down their properties. So Kim, she asked the guys if they would climb on her roof and do the same thing. She had a tremendous fear of being abandoned in case of any sort of evacuation, and they promised that they wouldn't leave her. Ironically, it would be Kim who would end up leaving them. One of my favorite things to do when I tell these stories is point out some of the coincidences or connections, I guess. I will now share with you some of the ridiculous things I spend time thinking about. If you've been on this tour with me from the beginning of Hollywood Heights, you'll recall that Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love lived on Hightower, seriously less than a 2-minute drive from here. Kim's Road, Hillcrest, is a pretty popular cut-through off of Franklin. Well, anyway, they were living here in the early 90s, the same time that Kim was living right here. Kurt, he was working on Nirvana's In Utero album, and on that album is a song called Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle. Kurt wrote the song because, well, he and Courtney were pretty infatuated with Frances Farmer, especially because she had hailed from Seattle. The couple, they really identified with Frances's mental issues and the way she was treated by the press. That song was written out here, but it was recorded at a studio in Minnesota where, ironically, Jessica Lange now lives. Just a little random universe connection there. I do, though. I really think about weird things like this. Like, did Kurt and Courtney drive by while, I don't know, Kim was getting her mail or walking across the street to the park? I mean, did they have to wait for Roddy McDowell to park his car or something? I mean, I'm sure they didn't even know Kim Stanley was living here, but these are the questions I would ask Courtney Love. I'm sorry, they just are. I also wonder if any of Kim's students told her about that song. I mean, Nirvana was just huge at their peak at that time. I don't know, I love Kurt and Courtney and Kim, so it's just a very special neighborhood to me. And 1 year after Kurt Cobain died, Kim decided once and for all to move back home to New Mexico in the spring of 1995, saying goodbye to Hollywood and 1914 Hillcrest. Kim's return to Santa Fe meant leaving her career as well as acting permanently behind. She was now living closer to her son Jamie, now with a family of his own, and going by the name Jamie Clift. With her 2 daughters also grown, Kim was a grandmother of 3. Her life in New Mexico was pretty uneventful, very quiet. She kept in touch with friends, but mostly kept to herself as she had done here. Some people believe she had quit drinking for good, and others had reason to believe the opposite. But in the end, it was uterine cancer that claimed Kim Stanley's life at the age of 76 on August 20th, 2001. She was survived by a brother named Justin as well. Anna Gunn organized a memorial service for Kim in Santa Fe, attended by her family, friends, and former students from the college where she coached. New York also mourned for their beloved actress in October, 1 month after the World Trade Center attacks. I actually printed out the write-up that Playbill published following the event, and I want to read just a few excerpts from it as we close out. It said, "The speakers at the October 12th memorial for actress Kim Stanley evoked the memory of the late actress with a sense of reverence and self-abnegation unusual in an industry known of ego and self-aggrandizement. Nearly every person talked about their given experience working with Stanley, who died August 20th, as the best time of their professional lives, and the audience, which listened in quite awe, seemed to understand and concur with their estimation of Stanley's talent. Estelle Parsons, artistic director of the Actors Studio where the event was held, set the tone early on by calling Stanley the greatest actress of this century. Stanley was one of the Actors Studio's most treasured graduates, a dedicated student of method acting. During her brief heyday, which spanned the 1950s and ended with her final New York stage appearance in 1964, she was the most highly respected and acclaimed performer on the stage. Elaine Stritch, who worked with Stanley when the latter was famously starring in William Inge's Bus Stop, said that she had never experienced anything like working with that actress. "She informed me of the value of listening," said the usually hard-boiled Stritch, who was often on the verge of tears. "And it was painless. I had about 28 lines in Bus Stop, and Kim had 900, and I never once didn't hear every single word she said, every thought. I got notices for my listening on that play." Musing as to why Stanley abandoned the stage so early in her career, Stritch said, "I think she got too goddamn real." Playwright Henry Denker noted that his play, A Far Country, when produced across Europe, was always dominated by the leading male character, but when Stanley graced the work on Broadway, critics noted that the drama was undoubtedly the story of the leading female character. As Stanley's fame grew, her every turn on stage became a cause for excitement. Denker then told a story about the Los Angeles engagement of A Far Country, which aptly illustrated the devotion of her following. The show was scheduled to open in LA a mere 2 days after closing in New York, giving the stagehands very little time to ship and rebuild the stage set. Well, the California audience at opening night was chock full of powerful Hollywood actors and producers, all anxious to see the work of the elusive theater legend. At 8 p.m., however, the curtain did not rise, as work on the set continued noisily backstage. 8:30 p.m., still more hammers and angry voices. The minutes passed. 8:45, 9 o'clock, 9:30. No one in that auditorium left their seat, remembered Denker. They all so desperately wanted to see Kim. The curtain finally went up at 9:45. Denker also observed that Stanley was never diva-ish in her demands. She would never demand new scenes or line changes from the author. But during a read-through of the play, she would occasionally pause at a word or her expression would cloud during a passage. And by that silent communication, Denker would know that a change might be required. But she would never ask you outright to do it. Notes were sent by her friend, playwright Horton Foote, who wrote many of the plays that Stanley acted in on Broadway, and actress Vanessa Redgrave. Redgrave's one-time husband, Tony Richardson, directed Stanley. The two parents were so moved by her work that they gave their daughter Jolie Richardson, born in 1965, the middle name of Kim. The rest of the article mostly just talks about all of her credits, which now you already know. Thank you for indulging me on this, for letting me elaborate on one of Hollywood Heights' most illustrious residents. I first heard of Kim Stanley years ago when my best friend Mike, a New York City trained actor, told me all about her, and he insisted that I read Female Brando. Basically, you have him to thank for the master's degree in Kim Stanley that you all now have. I thank him, and I thank you for having the patience to stick this one out and let me pause on our tour long enough to talk about Kim. There's just not a lot out there on her. She did very few interviews, and most of her performances, the ones that received the highest praise, they evaporated once that curtain closed. She only leaves behind 4 films, well, 5 if you count the Three Sisters film version. Not enough to really garner any sort of Hollywood legacy outside of the extreme film buffs and devout theater folk out there. The amount of people out there still alive who can say they saw Kim Stanley act on stage in her raw, soul-bearing heyday is dwindling. That generation of Broadway is disappearing, and, well, I think it's important to keep that part of the arts alive through storytelling. So, again, I thank you immensely for joining me. But now, oh gosh, things are, well, they're about to get dark. Really dark.